In 62 AD, Seneca walked into Nero's presence and offered him everything: 300 million sesterces, estates across Italy and Spain, a fortune built across 2 decades at the center of Roman power. He asked for nothing in return except permission to leave. By the end of this, you'll know the 3-part argument Seneca made to defend himself, the same argument he proved with action in 62 AD, in front of the man who would eventually order his death. And you'll know exactly which part of it applies to the financial decision you're probably avoiding right now. Seneca was born around 4 BC in Corduba, modern-day Cordoba in southern Spain. His father brought the family to Rome while Lucius Annaeus was still young, and by his 30s the son had become the most admired essayist in the city. His prose circulated among Rome's educated class. His arguments were read, debated, hand-copied. Then in 41 AD, the Emperor Claudius exiled him to Corsica, a political accusation likely fabricated by court rivals, almost certainly triggered by jealousy. 8 years on a wind-swept island far from everything he'd built. 8 years is long enough to abandon your ideas. He didn't. He wrote philosophy through the exile. He wrote consolations for his grieving mother. His son died during those years, and he processed it in prose. He returned to Rome without the bitterness most men carry from far smaller losses. In 49 AD, Agrippina, Claudius's new empress, recalled him to Rome. She wanted a tutor for her 12-year-old son, Domitius. History would call him Nero. Over the next decade, Seneca didn't just teach. He governed. He drafted legislation. He wrote Nero's early speeches to the Senate. Historians call it the Quinquennium Neronis, the 5 good years, and most of the credit belongs to Seneca's steadying influence. His fortune grew with his influence. Imperial friendships brought properties and interest income. By the late 50s AD, Seneca was worth an estimated 300 million sesterces, one of the wealthiest private citizens in the empire. In 58 AD, Senator Publius Sullius Rufus stood before the Senate and named the number. While preaching voluntary poverty, Seneca has accumulated 300 million sesterces in 4 years of imperial friendship. Through legacy hunting and usurious interest rates, Seneca had a prepared answer. But the accusation had already spread. And the question it raised, whether a Stoic could hold that much wealth without losing his philosophy, was one he'd been working on for years. Here's what nearly every account of Seneca gets wrong. The charge assumed that poverty and virtue are the same thing. They're not, and Stoicism never claimed they were. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, made a precise distinction. There are genuine goods: courage, wisdom, justice, self-control. These are virtues, and only they have moral weight. Then there are indifference, health, reputation, freedom, wealth. They're neither good nor bad by nature. But Zeno added a second layer. Some indifferents are preferred because they give you more capacity to act virtuously. A poor man can be virtuous. A healthy man has more options. A philosopher positioned at the center of imperial power can prevent decisions that a poor man can only observe from a distance. Principle 1. Wealth is a preferred indifferent. Not the goal, not the obstacle. Its moral value depends entirely on who holds it and what they do with it. Principle 2 is harder. Plato argued that cities would never be well governed until philosophers became kings, or kings became philosophers. Seneca had read this. When Agrippina offered him a 12-year-old heir with no philosophical framework and unlimited future power, he could have declined. He could have stayed separate, preserved his reputation, avoided the inevitable complications. He chose to be in the room. If you step back from power to keep your hands clean, here's what fills the vacancy: people with no philosophical framework at all. People who mistake cruelty for decisiveness. The question isn't whether philosophy belongs where power is exercised. The question is whether the philosopher is willing to pay the price of being there. Seneca paid it. The price included the fortune. Here's the assumption behind every accusation Seneca ever faced, that he accumulated 300 million cestis because he wanted it. That the wealth was a seduction, evidence of a man who couldn't live what he preached. That assumption is backwards. As the historian Merivale observed, wealth was necessary to men high in station. Wealth alone could retain influence, and a poor minister became at once contemptible. Without the fortune, there's no credibility in court. Without credibility, no access to Nero. Without access, no ability to slow the machinery when it aimed at cruelty. The wealth wasn't the destination. It was the cost of staying in the conversation. You have two principles now. The third, the one Seneca considered the most demanding, explains why 62 AD matters and why it's the part of the story most accounts skip entirely. Before I get there, there's something Seneca wrote about a philosopher named Demetrius that shows exactly what genuine indifference requires. Ask yourself this: when did you last make a significant decision about money without it affecting your sense of who you are? Most people can't remember. If that question makes you uncomfortable, Demetrius is about to explain exactly why. In the 7th book of On Benefits, Seneca describes a cynic philosopher named Demetrius. Demetrius had given away everything he owned. The Emperor Caligula, hearing of his reputation, offered him 200,000 sesterces. Demetrius laughed. Then he said, "I do not intend to fasten upon my back a burden like this, of which I never can rid myself, nor do I, nimble and lightly equipped as I am, mean to hinder my progress by plunging into the deep morass of business transactions." Seneca recorded this with something close to reverence. But Demetrius was a cynic, a man whose philosophical method required total renunciation. Seneca chose a different path. And this is where Principle 3 finally arrives. Principle 3, the test of indifference, requires having something to lose. A man who has never had wealth isn't indifferent to it. He's simply never been offered it under real conditions. Stoic detachment can't be practiced in your imagination. It has to be demonstrated when the stakes are actual. Seneca wrote this to his friend Lucilius in letters that circulated through Rome, the way shared essays circulate today. First, in the original Latin, non qui parum habet, sed qui plus cupit, pauperest. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. And in On the Happy Life, the essay he wrote specifically to answer the hypocrisy charge, he made the structure explicit. He does not love riches, but he prefers to have them. He does not receive them into his spirit, but only into his house. These aren't rationalizations written by a man who had it all figured out. In On the Happy Life, Seneca is not triumphant. He's candid. He admits the tension directly. You ask why. If virtue is the only good, I don't choose poverty. His answer isn't tidy. He says he prefers wealth, even knowing he doesn't need it. He doesn't pretend otherwise. That frankness is what separates him from every modern writer who borrows Stoic vocabulary and removes the difficulty. These are words from someone who wrote about death in almost every essay, who survived 8 years of exile and came back without resentment, who watched a student become a tyrant and kept writing anyway. In 62 AD, Seneca made the argument with action rather than words. He went to Nero, who was by then violent and erratic, whose paranoia was beginning to thin the court, and offered everything back, all of it. His estates, his money, his entire accumulated fortune returned to imperial control. He asked only for time to write, for simplicity, for a quiet end. Nero refused. He said the empire needed Seneca's counsel. The fortune stayed, but the offer had been witnessed and recorded. Seneca spent 3 more years pulling back from public life. Fewer appearances, limited visitors, philosophy instead of politics. He understood what was coming. In 65 AD, Nero accused him of involvement in a conspiracy. The evidence was thin. The sentence wasn't. Here's what this looks like when it's your money, your career, your life. Not a philosopher's biography. You're offered a role that doubles your income. The work means nothing to you. The manager is someone whose judgment you don't respect. Seneca's question isn't whether you need it. It's whether you can hold it with an open hand. Whether 5 years from now, if someone took it away, you'd walk out the door as the same person who walked in. Most people know the answer before they finish reading the offer letter. They take it anyway. They tell themselves they'll leave when they're ready. 3 years later, ready means something different than it did. Seneca knew this. In On the Happy Life, he admitted it directly. He acknowledged his own wealth. He didn't pretend it wasn't there, and he said his hold on it was lighter than it looked. The honest version of that question isn't would I give this up? It's what would I have to change about myself to hold on to it? If the answer is anything meaningful, you already have your answer. Someone offers you support, money, connections, access, and the terms aren't stated but are clearly understood. You'll owe them a version of yourself that fits their expectations. Seneca's framework asks the same question it always does. Not whether you can receive the gift, but whether you can receive it without letting it relocate something important. Not into your house, into your spirit. That's the line he drew. It's the only line that matters. There's no instruction here that covers every case. Seneca never pretended there was. What he built, across 4 decades of writing and one very public life, was a test he could run on himself. In 62 AD, he ran it. The result was recorded by Tacitus and has outlasted every accusation Sulius ever made. Tacitus records how Seneca died. His veins were opened by order of Nero in 65 AD. The blood ran slowly. Age and austerity had thinned it. His wife Paulina, beside him, opened her own veins too. Nero heard. He sent guards to bind her wounds. She survived by imperial mercy. Seneca didn't. The blood wasn't enough. He asked for hemlock. It didn't work. He was carried to a hot bath to hasten the end. He dictated his last thoughts to his secretaries. He was calm. The process took hours. That is not a clean death. That's what years of philosophical practice actually looks like when tested under conditions that don't cooperate. Not a metaphor. Not a thought experiment. A man, old, bleeding, still dictating, who had already made his peace with what he owned and what he was willing to lose. If this changed how you think about what you're attached to, subscribe. The next episode covers Epictetus, episode 4. He was born a slave. He never owned property, never held office, never had anything to protect. And from that starting point, he built the most radical Stoic argument for human freedom ever written. That's what indifference looks like when you never had anything to begin with.